Nick, welcome to the podcast.
Thanks for having me, Eric. I'm super pumped to be here on the show.
Yeah, and so we're going to talk about launches today in the conversation, but kicking it off, I just wanted to get a little bit of background on you and just reading about you. So you work in project management. It looks like you move around a lot, but where are you originally from?
Yeah, so I'm originally from Wisconsin, like central, like right in the middle of Wisconsin, and went to school, kind of jumped around to Minnesota, then back to Wisconsin, kind of hung around different schools in Wisconsin, and then ended up picking up a project management job, which, in construction space, the projects would last a couple months at a time, but I was like all over. One year I was in North Dakota, another year in Michigan, Ohio, like kind of bounced all over the place. And then most recently, and by most recently, I mean like 2018, we moved to West Virginia, and that's kind of where we've hunkered down. We ended up buying a house here, and yeah, this is home for now.
Right on. And you still are you still working as a project manager?
Yeah, it's a different company. I'm working in more of a corporate setting, not so much field hopping around. So I get to manage them from one spot versus worrying about where am I going to be living in the next couple months.
Yeah, a part of me is jealous that you did get to move around. I kind of wish I had a similar experience. Now I have a family and stuff, and so we're settled. But I think moving around is kind of gives you like just a unique perspective on things. And if you aren't settled down with a family and stuff, I think that could be actually fun and a great experience.
Yeah, it was cool. We went to a lot of places that we probably never would have gone out and visited just for fun. So we got to see a lot of cool things. We already like traveling, so that was kind of cool. We didn't get bored of being in one place because we weren't there for too long. And then West Virginia, like of all places, I never thought I would be living in West Virginia. So it's kind of cool being able to see that. And then, have the option of, okay, we've seen a couple places now. Where do we actually want to live?
And, that's cool with podcasting too, because with platforms like this, like Riverside, and you can be remote. And even before like the whole COVID and like Zoom phase where everyone was like Zooming all the time, I feel like people were already doing a lot of remote podcasts.
Yeah. And honestly, I was getting into podcasting in 2020, like amidst all of that. It wasn't as a result of it. It just happened to be when I started messing with it. So like the remote recording software and stuff like that was like all I knew. And having like I don't think I've ever had just a face-to-face interview for my podcast at all, which would be awesome, but I just haven't done it.
Tell me about this book that you read, The Millionaire Fastlane, Crack the Code to Wealth and Live Rich for a Lifetime. And that, in addition to Pat Flynn's Smart Passive Income, which I think everybody knows, but it looks like that kind of got the wheels turning and you're like, this is a good gig, but I want to do something else, or at least on the side.
You did some digging.
Well, no, it's because I like to read too. I haven't read this book. I haven't read too many like wealth books, but one book for me, the David Goggins book. I read it during COVID, but yeah, that inspired me to do a lot. It's just interesting, like the different books and people's or pivotal moments like that in people's lives that like send them down a path.
Yeah. So funny story with that. So as I was doing the project management stuff, I was like fairly recently graduated out of college. Still didn't really know what I wanted to do with my life, just kind of figuring out. And I'm like, you know what? I'm an adult. I should read like a business book. I should get educated in business. And we went to Barnes and Noble, just kind of browsed around, and then it's like, nah, okay. Then I found the Millionaire Fastlane, and that was just like catchy title. It's like, okay, this is interesting to me. And what sounds like a get rich quick scheme kind of book, it was definitely not like that. Like this guy was methodical and so smart, and his whole mindset around life and our career just completely flipped a switch on mine. And basically the whole premise, the thing that really stuck out to me is he said, we spend all this time basically being told what to do throughout our entire life. It's all scripted out for us.
Yep.
We go to school, we get good grades, we get a career, we ride that career out until we're 65, we can retire. And that's the point that you can start enjoying life. And like basically live off of all this work that you put in. And he said, but who's guaranteeing that you're getting into retirement age? You can get sick. You can end up in a wheelchair. There's so many things that can happen between now and then. And you're basically going to gamble on that and say, yeah, we'll see what happens. Hopefully I make it that long. It was like, shit. Sorry, I don't know if I can swear in here.
Swear away.
So yeah, I was like, shit, he's totally right. What if I don't wake up tomorrow? And I've been busting my ass to try to build something that I can be proud of, and then I don't even get to enjoy it because I'm either sick or don't even make it that far. So it's like, I need to start building something now to give me the freedom to do what I want and enjoy life now, rather than just put it up to chance later on down the road.
Yeah. No, I mean, I think it's something to think about. I think, yeah, when you're stuck, let's say like in your 9 to 5 or in a career, yeah, you don't necessarily think about it. You don't think about like, without that career, yeah, if you get fired or something happens and you can't work that job anymore, you don't have money coming in or something else. Just something else generating money really. Yeah, it's going to be rough going.
Well, and at the time, my thought was the same thought a lot of people had, is like, oh, well, a 9 to 5 job is stable. It's like a sure thing. And with COVID, a lot of people realized pretty quickly that that stable job isn't as stable as they actually thought. So again, we're just kind of leaving it up to chance. The whole thing, like what kind of stuck in my mind is that the control, like, do you have control, like legitimate control over your life? Or is someone else kind of pulling the strings there? And in this case, it would be an employer. To me, like, they have the control. I don't have that. I want the control for my life. It's my life.
Just kind of living intentionally, really. And yeah, I wonder if, yeah, because I started thinking more about this too, maybe like 5-6 years ago. But yeah, it's just interesting that if it doesn't cross some people's minds, which I don't get. I don't get how it wouldn't, but I guess, yeah, you're just in your career, you're just so used to that mindset all the time that kind of breaking out of that can be challenging for people, I guess. But it's kind of shocking that more people don't think this way, or maybe they don't know. You know, maybe it takes like a book like this, or a podcast or a YouTube or something, and then you start to think like, or an event like COVID, like an event that makes you think like, oh, okay, I maybe got to get something else going on in addition to this. So yeah, it's just interesting.
That was really the premise of my show, my podcast. I interview people who have been through that situation, because I agree. I think now that I'm kind of #woke to this idea, it kind of blows my mind when people aren't. So I want to share those stories of people who have been there. But when I was in that moment, I'm like, I'm doing all of the things right. I'm doing what everyone tells you you're supposed to do. And it just doesn't fit. It doesn't feel right. So what other options? And I was like, okay, start a business. But in my mind, the only business owners, like the real business owners, were like Elon Musk, where he's like uber rich, like way more. Yeah, like I wasn't thinking about anything in between Elon Musk and working a career, like a 9 to 5 job. But there's so much in there.
Yeah, there's so much in there, and even people say like you don't have to reinvent the wheel. You just you just need an idea, and it's probably been done before, but you could do it in a way like put your spin on it and find your little niche in the marketplace. Did you think like when you were thinking about transitioning or getting a side hustle, were you thinking about like passive income, or were you thinking of like another business, but where it's more of like something that you get paid for your time, not something where like cash flows like coming in while you're sleeping, or however, you know, while you're not laboring away?
Yeah. I mean, for me, like you had mentioned earlier, I had, shortly after reading that book, I had started listening to the Smart Passive Income podcast, and that podcast specifically kind of turned me on to the idea of like all these different passive income opportunities. And passive being kind of a loose term, but that was what I wanted, because it was like, okay, if I can establish something where I'm making enough money to do the things that I want to do to some capacity, just even pay the bills, like it becomes on me. Like if I want to make more money, I know that I just need to do a little bit more and I can make a little bit more. Or if I'm like, okay, I'm good with where I'm at, I can just kind of sit with where I'm at and be like, yeah, this is cool. I'm fine with that. But again, comes back to kind of that control, is like, I'm not waiting for someone to tell me, oh, you get to make a little bit of extra money this year. And it's like this. It's like, no, this month I'm going to crush it.
Right.
And I'm going to make a ton of money. And then next month, maybe I'm just going to sit back and kind of relax a little.
You know, it's funny because that's kind of how I am to some extent. Like, I feel like I'm in a phase right now, where I'm trying to crush it. And I realize, like, it's so simple, but it's you don't, at least me, I didn't really realize it at first, but it's like the more work I put into this, the more money I can make. And then I've had times like my daughter was born like 4.5 months ago. And I was kind of in a phase then for a couple months where I was like, all right, I'm in a good rhythm. I'm not chilling, but I'm not, it's weird for me. It kind of like ebbs and flows, but it really does come down to the fact that, like, once you realize that you can be in control, and you can make those decisions if you're in a season of life where you're hustling, or if you're in a season of life where you're kind of kicking back because you did hustle for so long and now you're kind of reaping the benefits of that.
Yeah. And I've been hearing it quite a bit. A lot of people using the term seasons. And I like that, because I never think about that until I hear someone say it. I'm like, yeah, that's exactly it. Like going through these different seasons instead of like stages. I don't know.
I like putting it that way. I think, I've heard that too. I probably copied that from someone. But so tell me, okay, so you're working and then you get these ideas. Okay, I can be more in control of my life. And maybe I can make some money, or maybe it'll eventually turn into a thing where, that's all I can focus just on me and my businesses and my ideas. So where does like the podcast, let's hear about like your journey into your own podcast, but also where'd you get the idea to start helping people launch their podcasts?
Yeah. So my podcast was just kind of it just kind of happened. From listening to like Pat Flynn on his podcast and everything that he was doing and starting to find other podcasters, I knew that I wanted podcasting to be a part of what I was doing. But at the time, like when I started the 9-5 to Freedom brand, I was more thinking down the road, if I have this big enough audience that cares what I have to say, then I'm going to start a podcast. And I just kind of got more into content creation. I was going from blogging, and I just didn't like writing. So I was like, okay, I'm going to do a YouTube channel. Like YouTube is hot. Like people are building channels, they're monetizing those channels. And that I couldn't do it. I struggled so hard. The getting in front of the camera, recording, like I freaked out. And I was like, okay, that sucks. What about podcasting? If I do interviews, like if I find people that I can talk to, it's not just me talking in front of a camera for 5, 10, 15 minutes, whatever it is. I can actually have a conversation and the guest can kind of help carry some of that weight. So it's not just all on me to be like, am I just rambling, or does this make any kind of sense? I can just talk with somebody and it can be something of value. So that's kind of the idea of the podcast, like kind of where it kicked off. And I always think it's kind of funny. When I did that, I was still like obviously very nervous of interviewing people, talking to people, and being entrepreneurs and business owners and stuff like that. It's like, I haven't built a business really. Like I'm kind of in the early stages. So why would they want to talk to me? So the first interview I did was with my brother, because he was starting to do like get into the SEO space. We were kind of working on some stuff like that together. So I interviewed my brother right out of the gate. I was like, knock this one out, like easy, one down. And then the next interview I did was with my wife's cousin, and she was building her private practice. So I was like just hitting really easy interviews throughout this entire process. It kind of like helped get me into a groove. And then I started finally getting other guests that I didn't know who they were. I just knew of what they were doing. And that became really cool. That was, once that started happening, it was like, wow, there's something to this. And along the way, as I launched mine, that's when I kind of started helping other people launch theirs. They were seeing my podcast and like, how do I do this? Like, what equipment do I need? How do I record the episodes? How do I edit the episodes? And I was just kind of helping people along. And it wasn't until this year that I thought, you know what? Like, I should do this as a business. I should make money. I know what I'm talking about. I've helped several people already do this. I've been looking for something like, how do I build my place as an entrepreneur in? I was like, it's staring me right in the face. Like, I should be in podcasting. I should be teaching people podcasting.
There's a double question. What goes into what do podcasters get wrong about launching? And then tell me like how your philosophy and kind of what you do kind of solves that and the way that you take them down the correct path.
So I think one of the biggest problems going for most podcasters in a launch is that there is no real launch. There's no strategy behind it. It's, I figure out what I need to do, I record it, and then I put it up, and now it's there. It's like, okay, awesome, you did it. Like, that's great. But now the problem is there's no one listening. You get all excited creating this thing, and this is exactly what I did with my show. I got so amped up about doing it, and I've recorded these episodes, and like, okay, it's going to happen. I'm hitting publish now. And it was like, but no one's listening. So all that excitement just kind of fizzles away right away. I was like, man, something's wrong.
Reality kicks in. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. It's kind of a upsetting moment when that happens. And I know I'm not alone in that. So through helping these other podcasters get started, I kind of took a little bit more of a strategic approach with the launch, and we kind of did some more work on the front end of getting people involved, like getting people excited about the show before it actually comes out, telling people that it's coming out before it comes out. And even more importantly than that, like building your audience and having conversations with people wherever that audience exists, Instagram, Twitter, like most likely it's going to be social media to start. Building relationships and getting people to actually start caring about what you're doing so that when that podcast does launch, you have people that are like, oh my gosh, this is awesome. Like they're hyped for you. And it's not just you being like, oh my gosh, here we go. And then crickets.
What came first, the chicken or the egg? But you're saying, and it makes total sense, that before you even put that first episode out, you start building some buzz across your social media. Maybe you probably don't even have a newsletter at that point. So yeah, using social media to start letting people know what you're doing, kind of position yourself as an expert in what you're going to be talking about. And I guess how do people do that? Is it do you need to start doing reels or creating graphics or putting your cover art up and say, hey, coming in a month, this is going to be launching? Like, I guess what's what's kind of the process? And I'm sure it looks different, but yeah, just give everyone an idea, just listeners that have never done this before.
So I started getting on reels probably in like March, and I started getting like really excited about them, because I hadn't done video content really that much up until that point. So I'm a big proponent of like reels and TikTok and stuff like that. But I think Instagram is like the hot spot to be for doing any kind of like podcast launch. Between that and Facebook groups, I think are two of your best places to start. And in the beginning, I wouldn't even say that you need to necessarily be like buzzing up the podcast yet. You can be creating some content, some really simple content about what you want the show to be about, before you even start like really getting into the weeds with the podcast itself. Because one, you're going to be able to kind of test the idea out, see if this is something that people are interested in. And two, like I mentioned before, you want people to start caring about the content you're creating. Well, that's very difficult when you're just putting content out there and expecting people to show up. That doesn't really happen. I've went back and forth on Instagram so many times, going through that like cycle of like, okay, I'm just going to post really consistently and people are going to find it, and then they don't, and then I get frustrated and quit. And then I do it again, like, here we go, this is it, I'm going to stick to it this time. And then no one pays attention, and then they quit. when I started finding people and engaging them through engaging with their content and then actually starting conversations with them in the DMs, they started taking an interest in what I was doing because I was taking an interest in what they were doing.
Yeah.
People aren't going to come to you. They don't care unless you give them a reason to care.
You have to show interest. You have to support them. Then in turn, they're going to support you. So I think the whole thing of like, aside from the posting, but like the engagement with other people, it's definitely something I need to work on. And I'd imagine a lot of people struggle with that.
I mean, I think you could probably start building those relationships without posting any content at all and still do better than if you were just to say, throw content up there or just publish the podcast and say, hey, look, everybody, here it is. It's the conversations that make a difference. And I mean, I feel like it's not probably a popular answer to how do I actually build an audience for a podcast, but that's the reality of it. That's what podcasters aren't doing because they're too busy trying to do the things that get them 10,000 downloads in a month, like that. Like they're looking for that click, like one button click solution that's going to give them all that. And it doesn't exist unless you get extremely lucky and one just happens to go viral for some reason. It's just not going to happen.
It's interesting too, because it's like social media, like in theory, it was all probably built with the idea to try to bring people together from all over the world. But it's weird because like, yeah, everyone gets so like focused just like on scrolling their feed all day. They don't think that like, oh, there's actual people out here I can connect with. And they'd probably want to connect with me as well. But everyone's just so used to just scrolling and just, you get stuck in like this time warp.
Yeah, exactly. And so I had interviewed Alex Sanfilippo, who is the founder of Podmatch. And he was this was like the first time I had thought about like doing something in this capacity. But when they were talking about building Podmatch, he talked about doing things that don't scale and how powerful doing things that don't scale is and how it actually works. And I was like, okay, yeah, that sounds good. It makes sense. Like if you're having these one-on-one conversations, like you can build a better relationship and better rapport with these people, but it'll be so slow until I actually started doing it and realizing like, holy crap, there's a lot of people now that are actually starting to care about the content that I posted. Whereas before I couldn't even get a couple likes on a post. And I thought the stuff was really good. The content was great, I thought.
I mean, I find that even with a lot of stuff that I put out, I need to get better about engaging people. And, it's not something you have to do like for hours and hours a day, but maybe if you just, I think Gary Vee was saying like DM like 10 people a day. I mean, I think I would be a little bit more thoughtful or strategic and maybe narrow it down to a couple people and make sure I send like a genuine message to someone whose stuff that I actually like, that I've been looking at probably for a month and I haven't thought to, or more longer than a month, I haven't thought to like hit them up to connect. But you're right. It's all connections, podcasting, and just, I think any kind of brand growth or social media growth in general.
Yeah. I mean, podcasting is, people get into podcasting because they can build a deeper connection with people. And if that's truly where you're coming from and why you want to start a podcast, then why are you not willing to build connections one-on-one with people? Do you actually want to build connections, or do you just want a massive audience that you can make a ton of money off of?
Dude, that's a great question. It's something I think about too. Like, I mean, I've been producing shows for like 6-7 years, but I've only had my podcast for about 6 months. And I'm constantly thinking like, what's my like genuine, like honest, what am I trying to do here? I mean, obviously I would love to make some kind of money, but it's like, yeah, I do want to help people too. And yeah, podcasting, it's all about the dialogue, the conversation. And it's like, if you're not, willing to connect with a handful of people on social media, it's like, what are you doing?
Yeah. I don't know. That was something that kind of hit me because I was definitely in the opposite
you just said
mindset.
That, and I was like, fuck, what am I? Maybe I have the wrong approach here.
But I've chased so many like strategies and tactics and like the gurus that are say, do this and you'll like be instant famous type of thing. And you just keep chasing it and you keep chasing it and nothing happens and you get frustrated, you give up, you pod fade because you're like, this isn't working. When the stuff, although it sounds like the slow play, it works.
Potentially you've never even been on a microphone before, so maybe we should even like start there. Are you recommending like equipment? Does it start with that? Okay, I have this, now I want to try to make it a podcast. I guess, yeah, let's start there.
Yeah, so I think like as you're having these conversations, I think before you even worry about equipment is the goal. Like you have to set the foundation for the podcast. So what are the goals? Why do you want the podcast? What's the purpose of it? What are you trying to achieve with it? Getting really clear with those things. This is another step that I like notoriously skip with everything that I do. And if you sit down and like really think hard about this stuff, everything else starts to make a lot more sense, and it makes the steps going forward a lot easier. So really figuring out what is the purpose, and then thinking, okay, if I want to get there, how am I going to get there? What are the steps that I need to take to actually get there? That's by far the first step you should be taking. Then when it comes to equipment, I don't think you need a ton of fancy stuff. You don't need to go drop hundreds and thousands of dollars to start a podcast. You could literally start one with your phone right now if you wanted to. This mic that I've been using since I launched the podcast is, I think, $60 right now on Amazon. And the quality of it's perfectly fine. I've never gotten a complaint about the quality. So you don't need to go shelling out a bunch for the highest quality Shure mic or anything like that. And it plugs right into the computer. Like you can literally just plug it in and play. Super easy. So I think a lot of people get caught up in that step, and that prevents them from launching or prolongs them from launching because they're like, man, there's so many options. There's microphone, equipment, software. Like there's all these things. I don't know what to pick. There's so many options, and really just find something, give it a try, and run with it. Like you can always change it up. You can always buy new equipment. You can always switch software, but getting started is the hardest part because you can make up a ton of excuses that prevent you from actually getting started.
Know your reason. Why are you starting a podcast? Because that'll, I think too, once you kind of hone in on that, and it takes some time to think about, but once you kind of realize like genuinely why you're doing it, that kind of becomes like your guiding light. So yeah, maybe when you're not getting as many downloads as you wanted, or things start to get tough, or just life happens, you're still kind of focused on that North Star of like, all right, well, this is why I started it, and this is a goal that I'm passionate about and that I want to achieve. So I'm going to keep pushing it because I have this thing to guide me.
And you can actually take a look at like how far, or you can see the incremental steps leading towards your goal. When you don't really have that goal, you don't really have any kind of frame of reference to track anything on. So you're just doing it, and who knows if you're doing good or doing bad because there's no timeline, there's no frame of reference there to actually look back on. So when you do have a goal, you can say, yeah, maybe I'm not making the progress I had hoped to make at this point, but I've still done X, Y, Z. I've still made this progress to get me to this point right now.
Okay, so let's talk about trailers. Did you launch with a trailer?
So I did.
Okay, so you got that right.
Trailer. Yeah, I did have a trailer. But so trailers, this is a fun topic for me because I think a trailer is the most underutilized piece of content that a podcaster has. And I didn't use it the right way. I just did what I thought was right. But I think when launching a podcast, podcasters like, okay, yeah, step 1, get equipment. Step 2, record a trailer. Okay, yeah, cool. I can do that. Record a trailer. Done. Boom. Check that off the list. Now we're going to record the first episode. Like, it's just kind of like a thing that podcasters do without giving some real thought to it. Now, the reason I say I think it's one of the most beneficial pieces of content that a podcaster has is because as you're producing the show, episode clips are great. It gives people a look into specific episodes. You can get people kind of excited, leave kind of cliffhangers for people. But I realized having like an entrepreneurship show, I cover a broad range of topics. I cover social media, email marketing, I cover building, systems, like cover a broad range of topics. If I post a clip about systemizing your business, that's going to attract a certain type of person. And then if I post a clip about social media marketing, but the person wanted systems, they all of a sudden, they don't care anymore, and they've already scrolled past, and they might not ever look at my podcast again. So the way I see it, episode clips are primarily for people who already know that your show exists and they possibly know what that show is about at this point. Your podcast trailer is a piece of marketing that you can use to let new people know what your show is about and what they can expect out of that show. That's what's going to hook them in initially. Then they can go check out Apple Podcasts and scroll through your library of episodes and say, okay, he's got episodes on this. Ooh, I want to listen to this one. But you're not even giving them a chance to go look at that content if you're just posting episode clips. So that podcast trailer, like that should be something that you're constantly blasting out there, putting it on your podcast homepage. Like that should be something you're continually using over and over and over again, because that's what's going to ultimately attract new listeners and bring growth to the show.
I'm wondering if I should, now I'm like, damn, I need to maybe put my trailer up here and there. It's weird too, because with content, this is a little sidebar, but yeah, sometimes I get, sometimes I'm like, oh, well, I already posted about that specific aspect of podcasting. But then it's like the people that saw it 2 months ago aren't going to be the same people. Some of them maybe, but it's not like, it's kind of arrogant to think like, oh, people have already seen that. But it's like you post again, it's like depending on whose algorithm it hits or what you tag, or like new people are going to see it.
I had the same exact mindset that you did, and that's why content creation for me was so difficult, because it was like, oh, well, I posted about this already. I can't do that again. Everyone's going to know, and they're going to be like, why are you posting it?
Yeah.
Like you just said, like you could post right now, and a certain number of people would see that, and another certain number would not at all. Then you could post it again, probably like an hour from now, and completely different people are going to see it, and the people that saw it the first time probably won't see it. So that's like a mindset thing that I think we all kind of have to get over, because there's too many people out there, and the algorithms do whatever the hell the algorithms do. So all you have to do is, I would honestly, like with a podcast trailer,
getting back to
push that out,
push it
a couple times a week, or maybe even once a week or twice a week, whatever that is. But make that a piece of content that you're, even if you do somewhat variations of it, that you're constantly pushing out, because like I said, that's what's going to get people like thinking, oh, like this podcast might be something that I'm looking for. Let's see what he's got or what she's got.
I like that. Yeah. You know, I'm going to maybe do something with mine, or maybe chop it up in a little different way. That's given me some ideas of, yeah, cause that's kind of like what is going to draw people in. So I like that. That's a great idea. Let's talk about launching. Let's talk about how many episodes you recommend people have in the can, and then how many episodes people launch with.
So I think, really, I don't think there's like an exact number, like this is what you have to do.
Sure.
But I like to tell people to have 2 to 3 episodes published on day one. And that's so if someone listens to episode 1 and they're still interested and curious, you might not have like totally sold them on the show yet. They have more episodes that they can kind of dive into, and they can kind of binge those first couple. You're not just giving them a taste and then saying, well, hopefully next week is good too. So I think having 2 to 3 right out of the gate is good. Then I like to personally stay 2 to 4 weeks ahead with recorded episodes.
Mm-hmm.
And I think just being that I interview a lot of guests, I want to make sure that I give myself enough time to be able to actually find the guests, get the guests booked, make sure that they can do the interview before I can get the episode in. So I'd like to get ahead of myself. I know at one point when cause I've taken a little bit of break from my podcast while I'm rebranding and doing some other things, but there was a point where I probably had like 4 or 5 months worth of podcast interviews like recorded and done. And I was like, this is cool. Like I don't have to worry. Like if I don't book anybody next week or the week after, like I'd be good. But I think there was, I think he's, shoot, I'm going to screw it up. His name is Jeff Lopes, I think. I think I might be screwing up his last name. He was a guest on my show, and he's been doing podcasting for a while. And he recommended not getting that far ahead. And the reason he said that was because if you get 5 months out, like I was, by the time that episode airs, that guest is the excitement of that guest coming on the podcast is kind of like fizzled out by then. They're not really as excited. They're moved on to other things. So when you do say like, hey, the episode's live, it's like, okay,
cool. Like we
recorded that like a half a year ago.
Forgot about it, or like, or who knows where they are in their life. Maybe they pivoted with their business, or maybe like, it's any number of things really, I guess. But yeah, you sent him like an email like 6 months later. You're like, hey, just want to let you know. Yeah. But
yeah, so that kind of like made me take a step back. I like stopped recording for a little bit. So like, okay, I'm going to need to at least get caught up a little bit. But I think as long as you're within like a couple of weeks to a month, that's a good place to be. And like I said, every show is different. You could record out a month in advance if you wanted to. It's see what kind of works for you too.
Yeah, I'm currently about a couple weeks ahead. When I first started, I was a little further ahead, and then had my baby, and so like life kind of got busy. But yeah, I think that's fair. I think too, it just depends on your own schedule. But I think a couple weeks, maybe 6 weeks the most. I don't know. A lot of the shows that I work on that I edit and produce for are usually, like a few weeks or a month. One guy's actually not quite as far as you, but he's pretty far ahead, maybe like 3 months ahead. And it's funny to see his excitement about it. But yeah, maybe I'm going to tell him now. Like, he's actually brought something similar up, where sometimes he'll even like forget he recorded an episode. He does them live or in person on his Zoom, like on an SD card, and sometimes he'll forget. Like it just gets buried, and he'll be like, "Oh, damn! I actually did this recording with this guy that we got to release." So I could see, I guess, how there's a couple things that can make it a little challenging if you're too far ahead.
And I mean, when you're going into the interview as well, like if we got into this interview and you're like, "Hey Nick, I'd love to have you on the show." It's like, cool, we did the interview, and then you're like, it's not going to air until like next November. It's like, wait, what?
And then you got to be careful a little bit too if like you talk anything the current event related, like if something happens in the world, like there was just all the elections, like if you do happen to have a show that's like related to like a sports team won like the World Series or the Super Bowl, and then you mention that like 6 months later, and it's like, oh. Yeah.
It no longer makes any sense. No one's ever like, what is he talking about?
Yeah. Tell me, what are some of your favorite like apps to use to help get organized for a launch? Do you have any like online services or apps or little project management? Coming from a project management background, I'd imagine you're kind of organized with that.
Yeah. Organized chaos is probably more accurate. I started diving in. I used to use like Trello, and I was like mixing it up with Airtable and kind of like doing this whole deal there. And I switched over to Notion, and Notion in terms of like tracking, I have all of my podcast episodes laid out in like a Trello fashion, where these are the episodes I have scheduled to interview or record. These are the ones that I have to edit. These are the ones that are scheduled and ready to get published. And then I have like a whole guest sheet within Notion as well. It's all interconnected and linked. So I can jump between this episode, I interviewed this guest. Here's all that guest information, their email, like everything. So that's kind of become my like information hub. So Notion by far is like my favorite management tool in that regard.
And when you're doing launches for people or you're talking to people about a launch, do you recommend that they get involved with something like that? Or is that too overwhelming, you think, in the beginning for new people?
Notion itself is kind of a beast. That was when I kind of gave up on for a little bit, because I was like so overwhelmed by like the blank and like how much you can do with it. But there's so many templates in there. If you wanted to, I think like coming up with some kind of system by 100%, you need something. And right, Trello is probably like a really easy to like jump in and get going type of thing, because it's just like, am I started? I'm doing it. I'm done. Like just something that you can manage that side of it. Like you mentioned, like having your friend or client there that is 3 months out and is like, oh, I just happened to find this episode. Like having a way to kind of organize that stuff ahead of time so you're not like losing stuff like that would be definitely beneficial. But also just so you can kind of track where you're at through all the stuff. And if you end up hiring a team or hiring a producer or company like yours, being able to kind of have that visibility in it all is going to help a lot.
Yeah, it helps. Well, one, just legitimize the process, but also, yeah, kind of give people like an organizational roadmap. Just step by step what needs to happen. What do you recommend people do? So they've kind of built this buzz on social media slowly. They're not necessarily posting any content that they're going to start a podcast, but they start interacting with people. Then maybe slowly they kind of start putting content out related to what they might podcast about. Let's say like they're like a parenting page and they're interacting with people. Then maybe they start posting about like recommended like baby products, and slowly that morphs into the podcast. They launch. What should someone do kind of after the launch? So like day one aside, or is that it? Is it really just once it's out, just getting it out and blasting it and talking about it as much as possible?
I mean, I think that's a big part of it. I would say, especially like now that you've been having these conversations, you've been interacting with people are starting to care about the stuff that you're sharing and talking about. Like, this is why I like Instagram so much, is using those Instagram polls and stickers inside the stories, because as it's happening, like people are understanding what you're doing. You can be like, hey, I'm thinking about doing a podcast on this, or I'm planning to launch a podcast. Like, who's interested? People are already invested in what you're doing, and they're more likely to interact with those story posts. And that gives you a good idea. Now, once the podcast is actually launched, you want to keep that going. Like, you want to keep those conversations rolling, keep engaging with new accounts, keep finding new people, but then nurturing the people that you do have. One thing that I really like to do with podcast episodes specifically is in the stories, I'll basically come on the story. It's just like me talking, and I kind of give like a preamble to the episode, kind of like a little hook into the show, and be like, I just got off this awesome interview with Eric. We talked about podcasting, like how to launch a podcast. It was so freaking amazing. The episode's live now. Do you want a link to go listen to that episode? Or would you like me to send you a link to go listen? And it's just yes, no. Everybody who sends yes, you send them the link to that episode, and they're much more likely to go listen because they've already committed, and you're not telling them, go click on the link in my bio and go listen to the episode there. Yeah, no one does that.
Yeah, I got to stop doing that.
It's such a hard habit to break because you see everybody doing this.
And it's like, I wish you could put links in Instagram posts and or reels. I don't think you can link in reels. I think it's just stories, right? But yeah, that's a perfect place, to keep that dialogue going.
Anytime I want to share like a link, or I want them to click on something, or I want to share something with, whether it's in a post or a story, I basically frame it as, do you want this, or do you want me to send you a link to go get this, and get their buy-in that way? Because it's a lot easier for someone to comment on a post that says yes, or DM me the word yes down below and I'll send you the link. Commenting yes is a lot easier than making them click to go back to your profile and then go find the link, and then they've already been distracted by some other posts they saw, and like getting their buy-in up front.
Yeah, and make it easy for them. Make it as easy as possible. You put in that work to do that for them.
Plus, you get a little transparency as to who's actually listening to it. If you send them the link, you can always check back in and be like, hey, I just wanted to see what you thought of the episode. And they're going to say, oh, yeah, I haven't gotten around to listening to it. Or they're going to be like, oh, I thought it was awesome, or this part was really cool. Like, you're having a conversation with your audience, and that's so cool. Podcasting is such a one-way conversation, and now you're able to kind of open those doors of communication and have those conversations with people, understand where they're actually at.
I love that. I love the idea of like the follow through, maybe like a few days later or a week later, whatever feels like natural. Hey, what'd you think? That's smart. I've never done that. I think that's a cool way to, just keep engaging, and then also get some feedback for yourself, like whether or not they listened, or maybe, hey, what'd you think of this part? Just feel connected. It feels like genuine, and in this crazy world of like, podcasts where it feels one-sided, social media almost always feels one-sided. So yeah, you're making that connection. And I think that'll just reap benefits for you down the road. And you never know who you connect with. There could be opportunities that end up happening with them. Maybe somehow they can help you, or you can work together, or you never know. And so I love that. Well, cool, man. It was good talking to you. Plug yourself. Where should people go to find you? Socials, whatever you've got going on, let the good people know.
Thanks, man. I appreciate it. And thanks for having me on, dude. This is a blast. My website is kind of a mess right now, so I won't have you go there. I think the best place to probably connect with me would be on Instagram right now. And my handle is @95free. And I confused myself with this on why I spelled out numbers, but it is all spelled out. So 9 NINEFIVE free FREE. And yeah, just come connect with me there. If I can help with your launch or answer any questions you got, just shoot me a message. I'd love to connect.
Cool, man. Thank you. Guys, check out Nick if you need any launching advice. He's your guy. And thank you for listening.